the battle. You see my victory. When all I see is a mountain, you see a mountain move. And as I walk through the shadows, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. Thank you, God. When all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. In almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. In almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. I am holding on to faith, 'cause I know you make a way. And I don't always understand, I don't always get to see, but I will believe it. I will believe it. You make mountains move, you make giants fall. You use songs of praise to shake prison walls. And I will speak to my fear, I will preach to my doubts that you were faithful then, you'll be faithful now. I am standing on your word. I'm calling heaven down to earth. You will fight my enemies. This will end in victory. And I will believe it. Yes, I will believe it. You make mountains move. You make giants fall. You use songs of praise to shake prison walls. And I will speak to my fears, and I will preach to my doubts. You were faithful then, you'll be faithful now. You were faithful then, you'll be faithful now. And I know that I know you never fail. Oh yes, I know that I know you never will. Oh, and I know that I know you never fail. Oh yes, I know that I know you never will. You make mountains move, you make giants fall, and you use songs of praise to shake prison walls. And I will speak to my fear, oh, I will preach to my doubts. But you were faithful then, you'll be faithful now. You make mountains move, you make giants fall. You use songs of praise to shake prison walls. And I will speak to my fear, oh, I will preach to my doubts. But you were faithful then, you'll be faithful now. You were faithful then, you'll be faithful now.
Give myself away. I give myself away so you can use me. I give myself away. I give myself away so you can use me. Give myself away. Give myself away so you can use me. Give myself away. Give myself away so you can use me. Here I am, here I stand. Lord, my life is in your hands. Lord, great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. And through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. seal the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your very body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the victory. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living
Hey, Christ Chapel, this is Ricky Shepard, and sitting here alongside with Pastor Billy Smith. Obviously, this is a service that's a little different than a normal live stream service that we would normally be doing, but we thought it would be neat to kind of do something a little different. And, you know, the story of Christ Chapel is something that it amazes me. I mean, I've been here 3 years now, but obviously I was not here at the very beginning of it. And we realize there's a lot of you, whether you're here with us on every Sunday or if you're viewing online, that you may not know the story of Christ Chapel. And one thing, Billy, that's always fascinated me, I've always been fascinated with businessmen and businesses that have, especially the ones that have started from the ground. Mm-hmm. I've also done a lot of studying of even churches that have just started, and just to find out their beginnings and to find out where it started, where was the vision birthed, and then to see where they are now. And so we thought it would be neat to kind of share that with you today as our Christ Chapel family and as well as our online audience. Just a few questions just to ask Billy and let him kind of share his heart and just kind of tell us the story of Christ Chapel. So Billy, you know, the first thing obviously is where did this all begin?
Well, I had been a youth pastor at a couple of different churches, and Tina and I were living in Macon and had resigned from that second church that I was a youth pastor at and started a small business that we loved. We liked doing what we were doing, but there was this impression in my spirit that I just couldn't get away from.
Right.
I knew that God was not done with us in ministry. I was hoping, Ricky, that ministry was a little bit like being in the military, like you do a tour and you get out. But unfortunately, it wasn't for us. And so we knew that God was once again pushing us back into a ministry role, and we felt like He was asking us to start a church. We didn't know exactly how to do that because the model 18 years ago looked much different than what we have now. We have sponsoring churches now. There's a big community of church plants that go through ARC, which is a church planting community. Right. But back in the day, you just kind of scratched your way through and you faked it till you made it. That was the process. But I want to say one thing about planting a church. Planting a church and dividing a church are two different things.
That's true.
And often church plants will get lumped together because you started something, but really it was just splitting off from another church.
Right.
Part of the beauty of Christ Chapel is we started this with a form of innocence that God has honored. We weren't part of a church and going behind a pastor's back to try to rally some people to go off with us to start something. Matter of fact, I believe in the law of sowing and reaping. And laws are things that, unless it's miraculous, they're never broken. In other words, in the Old Testament, one time, God commanded that the sun stand still. And that happened. But the law simply is that it's going to be day and it's going to be night. You don't just stop things unless God does it. And so there's a law of sowing and reaping, which means if you sow into something, you will at some point reap that as a harvest. And unfortunately, what happens in churches that start with division, it's only a matter of time until division is in the house. And one of the beautiful things over the last 18 years for us at Christ Chapel is we've had such harmony and unity. It doesn't mean there hadn't been trouble and there hadn't been times where we were frustrated. But God has honored the fact that you start something with the intention of not harming somebody else.
That's right.
And I just want to make sure it's clear up front that church planting and church splitting are two totally different ball games. But
Absolutely.
We felt like he was calling us to start a church. And we moved to Zebulon. This is my wife's hometown. And we just kind of started inviting a few families to join us on our back porch at our house. And 0 to 2,000 basically is what's happened in 18 years. It's pretty phenomenal. It's amazing.
Started on the back porch.
On the back porch. Those are
A lot
some
of good
times.
things happens on the back porches. Now that's some
Yes, they do.
That's some fun stuff. So in beginning in anything, whether it's in business, if it's relationships, churches, I know even in my life, just there's been several things that I've had ideas of, and I'd start something and I go, no, that wasn't the Lord, Ricky. That was Ricky. But inevitably, when you're in your wheelhouse,
Sure.
and you're in that gift zone, there's usually a defining moment of going, you know what, this is right.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have that moment, whether it was on the back porch or before the back porch or wherever, that you said, you know what, I remember this moment when I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah, that's an easy question for me to answer because I do have a defining moment. Tina and I had been wrestling with this idea of starting a church, and she was reluctant, just so we're all on the same playing field. She was reluctant about leaving Macon. She loved what we were doing there. She loved that there were plenty of places to shop and eat, and Zebulon doesn't have those things.
They're coming.
They are coming, with Pike Plaza, but they're coming. And, there was a reluctance on our part to step out and do something unless we really heard from God. And in the Old Testament, you saw people who would throw a fleece out and say, Lord, if it's you, make this happen. Now, I don't know that that's always spiritual, but I kind of did that. I said, God, I want to know before I drag my family into a new adventure, is this what you want? And I was taking our kids over to spend some time with my parents, and we were meeting halfway between Macon and Thomaston. We met in Yatesville at the little roundabout, little convenience store there, and he had a retired pastor with him, and his name was Leo, Pastor Leo. And Leo got out of the car, and I was loading my kids in my dad's car, and he walked over to me, and he said these words. He said, Billy, whatever you're thinking about doing, do it. He had no idea what we were battling with. He had no idea the frustrations that we were sensing. Do we do this? Do we not do this? Are we going to miss God? Are we going to mess up our family? He had no idea. But that one moment by a guy who had already really ran his ministerial career, he was retired. He was just enjoying life. One phrase from him solidified that we were going to do the Christ Chapel thing. And really, if we hadn't had that discussion that day, we may not be sitting here.
Wow. I think that shows you, and this is actually just off base, but what you just said there kind of got my mind going. You said that a man spoke to you and said, whatever it is you're thinking of doing, do it.
Do it.
And I know that the church is real quick sometimes for people to come up and say, the Lord told me to tell you. And what I have found is most of the time when people have said that, not all the time, but most of the time when people have said that, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, the Lord didn't tell you that. But in this case here, it further proves the point that if someone is speaking into your life, it's a validation or it's a confirmation of something that's already been planted in your heart. And I think that's proven there.
Typically, if somebody says, hey, I have a word from God to tell you, typically it's not surprising.
Yes.
It is confirmation from something you're already feeling and experiencing in your spirit. And I'm with you. I'm real reluctant to always take those as valid, because I've been burned a few times with people having that moment after eating a pepperoni pizza. They've got a word from the Lord for you, you know. So
you mentioned your wife Tina, and someone told me years ago, and you've heard it, and y'all have heard it many times, is that behind every good man is a surprised woman. And Tina is a great lady and a great wife, but thought it was funny that you had said something she was kind of discouraging initially. So other than Tina being discouraging in the front, you always have people that when you try to do something, they're going to, the naysayers.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have a lot of that, any of that?
Well, it was limited, but even though it was limited in that season of my life, it was magnified. Mm-hmm. In other words, when you're trying to step out on faith and do something that you know God's challenging you to do, one person or a small group of people can really discourage you.
Absolutely.
So I want to say, yes, there were haters. You know, Taylor Swift, one of the most, she has so much wisdom. Not really, but she has had the song, haters are going to hate, hate, hate.
That's right.
And there were some people who initially misunderstood the motivation of Christ Chapel, and they tried to block that. They tried to stand in the way of it. It was very limited. But the limited part of it didn't matter in my mind in that season, because I was young. I was disappointed that people that I thought would support us and clap and cheer, some of those were the people who tried to stand in the way. And that's hard for a guy. I was maybe 26 or 27 years old at the time. It was hard for me to swallow that those people really, they don't want to see this happen. How could they not want people to be reached for Jesus? I think you have to back up and go, though. Usually the loudest boos are from the cheapest seats.
Cheapest seats, that's right. That's right.
So you have to kind of scale how much am I going to allow that person to influence my decision making? Yeah. And I'm glad that we didn't. We just plowed through and finished. But Ricky, I believe in life, if you do nothing, they talk about you. If you do something, they talk about you. So if they're going to talk, let's just get busy doing something for the Lord. Let's allow our progress and even our success that comes from God to speak for us. We don't have to stand around and defend our actions. Let's just work for God and stay in our lane.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're sitting here today in our beautiful building. We just celebrated. We've been in June, I think, was a year that we've been in this building, and there's plans already. We actually have seen the plans already for another building that's going to seat 1,800. Sitting right over here to our right in our parking lot here, and it just got me thinking. You mentioned you started it on the. We obviously. You didn't wake up one morning and here we are. Right. There's been a process, and you started it. You mentioned it. It started out on the back porch. How many locations? Where all have you gone with Christ Chapel?
So it's interesting that people will walk into what we experience now, and they assume that this is the story. The story started at chapter 1.
Yeah.
This is like chapter 30. And we started on our back porch, which is right off Old Zebulon Road, which is where our church is at now. It's kind of funny that we went all the way around. Maybe we were like the children of Israel, wandering in the desert, trying to get back to Old Zebulon Road. But we started in the building in town. If you're from Zebulon, it's right across from the post office. It's a Mexican restaurant now. And we started there in 2003. And the church grew there. We had success. We had our youth group was really the only thing we had going for us then. Mm-hmm. We just put all of our money and energy in our teenagers, and some of my fondest memories are watching our teenagers catch a pass and a touchdown out in Highway 19. Now I don't know what we were thinking, but we were just too big for that location after a while. We went to multiple services there. And then an opportunity arose down the road on Sullivan Road. There's a building with a daycare facility and a gym down there. And we bought a daycare and ran that for a season, remodeled that building, and God really began to expand our region and our reach on Sullivan Road. And so we were there for several years, and now we're here back on Old Zebulon Road, and we kind of came full circle. But there's just seasons and chapters. And we know we're in a season now where, once again, incredible growth. Even during a difficult season with COVID and people who are sick, our church is still experiencing incredible growth. But there's just a process along the way. And one of the lessons I've learned in the Christ Chapel Project is this: trust the process.
That's right.
We sometimes want to speed it up. We sometimes want to have a season where we see everything happen and develop at once. But ultimately, I'm going to trust the process, and I'm going to learn to have sustainable growth and sustainable ministry. A lot of people start out fast and they kind of fizzle. I think God wants us to do ministry at a rate where we finish well, not just start well.
That's right.
And so, whatever the process looks like, we're going to try to stay exactly where God's got us and just trust Him. Whatever He has next. We hope it's that 1,800-seat auditorium that we're going to fill up 3 times for God. And so we're going to make those plans, but whatever He has for us is okay with me.
Well, and we all know, I was sitting here thinking about just, humble beginnings.
Yeah.
And there's people that, whether they're aspiring to be a pastor or maybe a businessman or a businesswoman, and they can look at this and they can say, hey, I want this. But the question that a lot of times they don't want to answer is that, okay, do you want this, but do you want to do what I've done, what you've done to get here? There's an old saying that says that, it makes me mad for people that were born on third base and they want to take credit for scoring.
Wow.
In other words, they don't want to they want to take credit for the accomplishments, but you didn't do anything to get there. And I think part of your story that to me is just, and I've heard, and I won't go into all the details, but I've heard a lot of the personal stories and the sacrifices
Sure.
that have been made from not only with you, but with your wife and your children.
Yes.
To get to where it is now. And the neatest thing is He's not the one taking the credit. It's following the Lord's direction, and
Sure.
it's doing what the Lord's called you to do from humble beginnings.
I don't want to interrupt you, but we sang a song a couple Sundays ago in church. In essence, the bridge was, after He's died for us, what really is a sacrifice?
That's right.
I mean, when we think about the things that we give and the things that we offer, and I would do all those things again. But I mean, what equates a sacrifice when Jesus died for me? You know, so I love the fact that He allowed us to sow back into the ministry, to the kingdom. I'm honored that He chose us to do that.
Kind of puts it in perspective.
It does. It does.
Well, in talking about the early beginnings, and, it's no big secret that these last, 18 months, year and a half, in the church world has been a very difficult time.
Yeah.
It's been a very difficult time, not just in the church world, because businesses that have had to shut down. I just went to a place of business here on my way here that because of COVID and because of the past 18 months, we're still seeing the effects and feeling the effects of just a different life and a hard past 18 months as we've had. So I guess my question to you is, over this last 18 months, would you say that maybe this has been the most difficult time for you in your ministry or not?
I would say it's been one of the most difficult times.
Okay.
I would say for our family, the most difficult 18 months was the first 18 months. NASA will tell you that it takes 80% of a shuttle's fuel to get it off the ground. The other 20% can keep it in orbit, allows it to come home, but 80% of the fuel is used just to get it off the ground. And I think what happens, that's why, the average church plant, 80% of them close before the 5-year mark. Before 5 years, they just don't, 80%. That really bothers me. But I know why. The cost to get something off the ground can be so great if you don't gauge it and keep some fuel in the tank. You'll be running on empty.
That's right.
And ministry is not intended for us to run on fumes. It's intended for us to live in the overflow. Like when you're filling up a coffee cup and there's a saucer underneath it, it runs over.
Right.
It's that run over that we do with ministry, but often we're trying to give out of places that we've let become deserts. And I think what happens is that in that early season of a church plant, the planter gets tired and he just gives up.
Sure.
But the first 18 months by far were the hardest. I mean, I remember having to go back to work after taking a full-time position at our church. And our church struggled there again at the beginning, and going back to work. And it was almost as if I was asking God the question, are you sure? Almost wanting to twist his arm to go, God, you know, we heard from you and we've stepped out on your plan. Why am I working at the mill at night? I mean, I'm at the bottom here, God. What's going on? But God was taking something out of me, Ricky. He was using that season to make sure that when we got to this season, that all the credit and all the glory went back to God.
Wow.
He was just robbing me of pride and arrogance and feeling like I was owed or entitled something. He didn't owe us anything.
That's right.
But we owe him everything.
That's it.
So, you know, that first 18 months, I would say, were the hardest for Christ Chapel and
Wow.
for our family.
And it makes sense. That's where most of the sacrifices were made.
Sure.
As you said, the 80% of the fuel to get to launch the rocket is the same in starting the ministry. So
Yeah.
that's a great perspective, though, because you would think, at least even with me, even just thinking, and even with the question there, that you know, in my life, this has probably been maybe not the most difficult time, but it's definitely been one of the most, and definitely a different time.
Yeah.
But when you put it in perspective, getting this thing started.
And I think early on, the not having a team, not having a staff, there was a remote loneliness that you felt when you were making decisions. You wanted to run it by somebody, but there was nobody to run it by. You ultimately just were running by the seat of your pants.
Right.
And the last 18 months have been hard, but man, I am surrounded by some of the finest people, some of the most qualified people in ministry. So yeah, it's been hard, but I didn't have to do it by myself.
That's right. Good. Well, and so I heard it said that it's wise to learn from your mistakes, but it's wiser to learn from someone else's mistakes.
Sure.
And maybe there's someone listening today, maybe you're wanting to start a business, a church, or maybe just something in general in life that maybe you could tell that person that, number one, maybe a mistake that you have made, or something that you learned from someone else to not do to prevent you from making that mistake.
Sure. Now, that list of mistakes I made would be long. We could be here a while.
We're on a time limit
right,
here.
we could be here a while. You know, the problem with mistakes is not that you make them, it's that you don't get back up and keep going. And I think most of my mistakes with the Christ Chapel experience, because I still feel like it's an experiment and an experience.
Sure, every day.
I think, look, I know it's 18 years old and everybody else feels like it's stable, but for me, it's like holding an 18-year-old boy going, is he ready to go to college? Can he sustain himself? So for me, it still feels fragile. I feel like I'm a father with a child with this church in some regards. But here's the thing, you know, I think most of the mistakes I made were relationally. And let's be honest, when people leave your church, sometimes if you're not careful, you will allow their departure to determine if you even like that person, if you're going to continue to be nice to that person. And early on, I feel like if anybody left our church, it was so personal. Like I did something wrong or they did something wrong and we couldn't continue to fellowship. But you know, the last 15 years of this church, people can leave and people come. Look, we got people who've left 5 times and come back 5 times at this point. I just feel like, you know, if you do church with us, great. If you don't, great. But let's just treat everybody fair and treat everybody right. Yeah. And I wish I had lived by that early on. I just didn't know any better. Yeah. We all have models in life that we follow, and look, it's very select. I can't know what you know because I wasn't subject to what you were exposed to. And you don't know what I know because you weren't subject to what I was exposed to. So all I knew is what I had seen my whole life. And people who left church, we just didn't have anything to do with them after that.
Right.
I think it's sad. In regard to that, if they leave, I just hope they go to church somewhere else.
That's right.
They just stay in the family, man, you know. So I think that's one mistake I made early on that I regret because there were some relationships that I feel like could have been salvaged. Had I known better, you know, this is just me being transparent and honest. I was just young and naive.
Right.
And I felt like, hey, we have the best church in the world, so why would you leave? I still feel that way.
Sure.
But I've learned to release people and that be okay. And to bless them going and to bless them coming. So that's a lesson I feel like we all can do a better job of in the church world. It doesn't mean somebody doesn't like you or opposes you or somebody's against you because they break fellowship on Sundays. They didn't break fellowship among being brothers and sisters.
Right.
The kingdom still stands.
Absolutely.
It's bigger than that. So I feel like I could have done a better job.
Dr. Sam Chan, he was at in a pastor's conference, and they were talking about this particular subject, and he told them, and I'll never forget it. He said, as pastors, young or old, if you will tell yourself two things: never take credit for people that come to your church, but never take blame for people that leave either.
It's good.
And I thought that was something that I'll never forget that, and it is true that. And I think even if you're careful, if you start taking credit for people coming in, then you're kind of diminishing of what God's doing, and you're putting it on you. But by the same token, if they leave, if God sent them, then sometimes God's going to send them.
Hey, and to the question you asked, and I answered it by saying I could have done better when some people left. Man, there's one couple that started with us on the back porch, stayed with us the entire time. They're still here. She serves on staff with us. That's so beautiful, but it's so uncommon.
It is.
What happens in the natural growth of church is that there are people who are comfortable going to a church that runs 200. That is their lid. They feel uncomfortable in a bigger crowd. So when those people leave, when your church grows, it may not be that there's anything wrong with you. Right. It could be that the church has just reached a level that they're not comfortable anymore. They want to be part of something smaller. When it gets to 500, we watch it happen. When it gets to 1,000, you watch it happen. And now that we're closer to 2,000 people, we still watch it happen.
Sure.
We have to understand that, sometimes we water and sometimes we plant and sometimes we reap a harvest. And anywhere we're at on that spectrum, I'm okay with that. So I just think it's interesting that heaven's going to be the only place that we quit going to church together at. Until then, people are going to shift. They're going to move.
Right. That's right.
And that's okay.
That's right.
We do life in seasons.
That's right. Well, in closing today, I thought about something. Dr. Jerry Falwell, who was the founder of Thomas Road Baptist Church and Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, he said something one time. We were there actually touring it, and he told a story of how he used to go and knock on 100 doors a day when he started his church.
Wow.
Of course, today you get shot if you tried that, but back then he'd knock on 100 doors a day to try to build his church. And I remember someone told him, they said Dr. Falwell said, they looked around, they said, "This is a miracle." He said, "Yes, it is. And it takes a miracle every day to keep it going." Whew. And I think Christ Chapel, you can look around. This is a miracle.
It's absolutely a miracle.
But it takes a miracle every day. And I'm just, I hope this has been a help to someone, encouraging. Maybe this, some of you that had no idea of the story. It is a miracle. And it continues to take a miracle every day. And I believe one of the reasons that God continues to bless it is because our leadership realizes that it's Him. It's nothing that we've done. It's Him, and it's Him blessing, and it's His miracle every day. So, Bill, you want to close us out?
I do. Let me finish with this statement, and then we'll pray together. So in 2003, starting Christ Chapel, there were three things that we said we would do. Start where you're at, use what you got, and do what you can.
Yeah.
Start where you're at, use what you got, and do what you can. And 18 years later, Ricky,
We're still fearing it.
start where you're at.
That's right.
Use what you got and do what you can. So if you're running a business and you're not satisfied with where you're at, you have to start where you're at. You have to use the resources you have. And you can sleep good every night if you've done your best. Do what you can.
Yeah.
Start where you're at. Use what you got and do what you can. Let's pray, man.
Yeah.
Lord, we are grateful for this opportunity to speak in people's lives today. Grateful to share a little bit of our story and how amazing it's been to hold your hand the last 18 years. Very humbled that you allow us to serve this capacity. The influence and the reach of this church is absolutely mind-blowing. We want to do good. We want to finish like the Apostle Paul said. I want to hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant. Keep our motivations pure. Keep our hearts right. Keep us focused and keep us in our lane. Let us finish our race, because everybody's race looks a little bit different. We're all trying to get to heaven, but all of us have a task to complete. In this church, Christ Chapel, we got a job to get done. Start where we're at, use what we got, and do what we can. I pray blessings over everybody who's watched today. In the wonderful name of Jesus, amen. God bless you.